Welcome to the Inside Pitch and our first live panel. Our discussion today is on screenwriting contests. I'm Christopher Lockhart, the creator and administrator of the Inside Pitch, a Facebook group for screenwriters, filmmakers, and creatives to ask and answer questions and exchange ideas and information about the craft and business of movie making. I've been employed in Hollywood for over 30 years, the last 23 years in the talent agency business, where I'm currently story editor at WME, the world's largest talent agency. I'm also a producer and a teacher. I'm a member of the Writers Guild, the Producers Guild, and the Television Academy, and I've been a guest judge for screenwriting contests such as Final Draft's Big Break Contest, the Wisconsin Screenwriting Contest, and the UCLA Showcase. And I'm happy to be moderating this panel today. Writers invest money in screenwriting contests, hoping they're an avenue that will lead into the business. But is this avenue a freeway to Hollywood or a dead end? Which contests are best and why? And is there anything you can do to increase your odds? These are some of the questions I'll ask along with your questions to our four panelists, all screenplay contest readers for contests such as the Nickel Fellowship, the Austin Film Festival, Fade In, Final Draft's Big Break, Page International Screenwriting Awards, and Stage 32. Our first panelist is a familiar name on TIP, as he is my co-administrator in the group and a contest reader with 10 years of experience, Ramesh Santanan.
Hey everyone.
Ramesh.
Hi.
So glad you're here today. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Also joining us is Connie O'Donoghue, who aside from reading for contests, manages the reader analyst pool for the Los Angeles International Screenplay Awards. She's a Sundance Episodic Story Fellow and a winner of the Austin Film Festival for her feature screenplay. Say hello to Connie. Hey, Connie.
Oh, hi.
Hey, Connie.
And for a minute, you were Lori, and then you became Connie.
It's so exciting.
I love how that works. Well, so let's just bring out Lori now, and I'll tell you, she has worked for Walt Disney Studios, Amazon Studios, and many small independent producers as a story consultant, writer, and producer. With over 20 years in the industry, she reads hundreds of scripts a year in many different capacities. Hello, Lori.
Hi.
So glad you're here. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Recently, we screened the original TV program, The Inside Pitch. And those of you who saw it will remember the co-host for his cool and incisive feedback. Aside from his contest reading experience, he was a development executive for Jerry Bruckheimer, a senior story analyst at ICM, and has read for Focus, MGM, Participant Media, Fox Searchlight, William Morris, Baltimore Spring Creek, Legendary, and New Line. He has an MFA in screenwriting from USC, and full disclosure, he is one of my closest friends. This is Jack D'Anibale.
Hey everybody, excited to be here. And just full disclosure, Lockhart and I aren't that close.
Well, there you have it. So
I kid because I love.
I love you too. I love you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our Inside Pitch members for your support and for tuning in. Ramesh and I, of course, want to give a shout out to our third administrator, Steve Enlow, whose endless support in the group is greatly appreciated, even if he is camera shy. So we're here today to talk about screenplay contests. And before I ask my first question, I just want to maybe just give a little bit of background information before I ask the question. And if you're a freelance screenplay reader for a studio or for a talent agency or a production company, your average pay might range between, let's say, $70 to maybe $110 per script. Screenplay contests are not quite as generous. The Nickel competition pays its readers $35 a script, and the Austin Film Festival pays their readers $0.
Yep.
So my first question would be, why read for screenplay contests? And then my follow-up to that would be, is there a difference between reading for a screenplay contest and, let's say, an agency or a production company? Anybody want to tackle that question first?
Go ahead.
I can jump in. I will say that I've read for many contests, and I started doing this as a favor. I was on set, and I was, I think, standing in as a script supervisor. Got to talking to somebody else in the crew, and they were like, "Oh, so and so needs readers. Hop over and check them out." And this was years ago, and I started doing it and I enjoyed it. Everything I do is for story. I love a good story, and there's nothing more rewarding than finding that diamond in the rough. And as I evolved in my own writing and professional career, I enjoyed guiding others, as we are here today. And it's always just been, hey, so-and-so needs help. I've never really sought out competitions, even though I've read for numerous ones. They've always sort of reached out to me like, hey, we're in a bind. And I always jump in. Some do compensate, some better than others, but it's very rewarding. So that's why I do it.
The reason I do it, you mentioned Austin. I read for Austin. That's no secret. The reason I got into for Austin is because honestly, I love the Austin Film Festival. They've been good to me. I have a ton of really wonderful friends who I met just going to AFF. So I sort of just started doing it. Figured it's free, I know, but I'll read for them. And then it just sort of spread into other contests, which some of them pay, some of them don't. But the reason I read for Austin is because I love AFF and the people who run it. Yeah, the other thing is story. I love finding a really good script, and I've had a pretty good record at Austin, actually. I think almost every year the few scripts I recommend either wind up as finalists, semifinalists, and I think one year I had 2 winners. So
Connie, you won the Austin Film Festival, and then they asked you to be a reader.
Right. That's where I started. But as you mentioned, the pay is the moral thrill you get from helping writers, and from, like I said, from seeing someone that you've recommended to seeing them go up the ladder. But that was kind of my entry into it, and I really liked it. And I've read for a couple different contests. The one I am working with now, the LA International Screenplay Competition, I like them the most because we're kind of focused on giving the writers the best coverage that's available out there, the most helpful analysis, and that's what kind of feeds me. That's why I do it.
Well, hopefully the Austin Film Festival will jump on the Hollywood bandwagon and consider paying their readers. They, of course, could always recruit their readers from the prison population somewhere. Jack, would you tackle the second part of the question, which is there a difference between reading for a contest and reading for, let's say, a production company?
Definitely. I think that overall, my personal experience with contests is to think of the submitted screenplays as if you're searching for writers to fill open writing assignments, to fill OWAs. And that shares, that geography, that sort of, dramatic geography is obviously shared by production companies and studios. But more often, the larger sort of piece of dramatic geography that, as an analyst, that you want to cover for a production company or a studio is, is this a movie, weighed toward concept, or weighed towards some companies that want to produce socially conscious content. That can obviously be a big part of your review of a screenplay. But I would say that's the biggest difference. Again, in my experience, the contests that I've read for, and I agree with all the other experts here, it can be a labor of love, on one level, with a little tongue in cheek, but it can be a little bit like the opening of Apocalypse Now. You know, I wanted a mission, and for my sins, I was given one. Right?
True. Very true.
But again, much more serious and much more to the point. To just commune with writers in that way, and to know that, you know, someone sat down and poured their heart and soul into it, and the contest could either be, you know, their mission to get a big break, or their mission to get some really valuable feedback from, you know, august sort of fixtures in the industry, like the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, like Austin, like Final Draft, et cetera, et cetera. But just to close it up, to button it up, is that in my experience, that difference is really, you know, thinking about the writing, the writer in terms of an open writing assignment, rather than the concept is always important, but a studio and production company, obviously, that can really be foremost in your mind as you look at a screenplay and decide whether or not to give it a recommend, a consider, or a pass. You know.
Thank you. So we talk about the money versus the passion. Are you reading the script all the way through,
Yes,
from beginning to end?
Yeah. Yes, I do. There are some contests that do require it. Now, granted, there are some that don't. But even then, when they say, you know, read up to 20 pages, 25 pages, there was a contest I read for, I think it was read up to 10, 12 pages. I read all 105 pages of that thing. So I will read the whole script 90% of the time. If it's required, yes, I will read the whole thing. I always do. But even if it's not, I try and read. If they ask for 10, 12 pages, I will read at least 50 or 60. Now, sometimes it's tough because I have read, I got a 186-page script once to read. You know, I've gotten 150, 170-page scripts to read, and those are tough going. But I will read the whole thing. Because for me, on the other side is I'm a writer too, and so I've submitted scripts to contests, and I would like to have thought that my scripts were read the whole way, and so I figure the least I can do is, even if they're not paying me, I'll read the whole thing. So yes, I do.
And I would, Chris, I would just quickly add that in my experience, that it has been made very, very clear that it is your responsibility as an analyst in the contest to read the screenplay from fade in to fade out. And if there is any indication in the quality of work that you turn in that you have not, there are obviously serious consequences, i.e., you know, you won't be reading those scripts. So again, in my experience, I've only been in a situation where it's been very clear your job is to put, you know, the kind of effort that the writer put into crafting the piece, you know, when you go ahead and cover it.
Well, that's very heartening, I think, especially considering that it is a lot of work, and so the fact that the contests have such high expectations for such low remuneration, and the readers are gleefully adhering to that and wanting to do that, perhaps because some are writers themselves and know what it's like to be on the other side of that, and as you suggested, Ramesh. So anybody else want to add to that?
I'll just say that, you know, there have been a few contests that have reached out to me, and once I looked at sort of their requirements, I declined because I felt that it was not beneficial to the writer. Let's just put it that way.
Interesting. So can anybody fill me in what is expected? I understand that it varies, but so you're reading the script, and then are you writing up coverage, comments? Is there a score sheet? What is it that the writers out there don't know? They know that you're reading the script, but what else are you doing in order to tabulate? How does that work?
Well, we have a score sheet just because it's a contest, so we have to have some guidelines for who advances and who doesn't.
Some kind of rubric makes
Right.
sense. Yeah.
Right, and it's a way to have an even playing field because we have multiple readers, so we all have to be kind of on the same playing field. I think going back to like reading the whole script, I think what that helps us do too is kind of weed out the readers who just want to like power through scripts and do it really fast and like make some money or something. So requiring that the entire script is read not only is more fair for the writer, but it helps weed out people who just aren't in it for the right reasons.
And how can you tell, if you haven't read the script yourself, how can you tell that perhaps the reader hasn't done a good job?
When I'm going through the coverage or the analysis reports from the readers that I'm working with, I'm looking for specific mentions of story beats, of character moments, of lines of dialogue. Sometimes they put in page numbers to help the writer know exactly what they're talking about. You can tell when someone's just flossing through a report, when they're just like filling in with things that they've written all the time. So I'm looking for specifics. I'm looking for things that are both critical, that are going to be a valuable critique, and also things that let the writer know, like, you're on the right path with these things, let's work and build up that. But I think you can always tell. And I think that when writers get their analysis back, they can tell too.
And then if they're unhappy, they let the contest know. Because unlike Hollywood, the difference obviously is that when I get a script on my desk, the writer has not paid me to read the script. So the expectation is quite different. And so do you get that kind of feedback from writers who say, wow, it's really apparent that the reader didn't read the script?
Yeah, I've never gotten that feedback, but I do get feedback from administrators, because a lot of these better contests also offer more in-depth coverage, so the writer can improve.
For extra money, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And some give feedback with the contest entry, but some also offer this other service. And quite often, I am given the material that I read for a contest to give more in-depth coverage on, because they've taken to heart the feedback from the contest.
Yeah, so you all take the feedback seriously, because I've seen some feedback. Sometimes our members will share contest feedback in the group, and it often to me looks like sort of boilerplate, and you could just sort of like mix and match it to so many different scripts, and I'm often unimpressed by what it is that I see. So, and of course, I'm not accusing any of you of doing that. But so, what is it that you do in your comments so they're not so boilerplate and cookie cutter?
Yeah, definitely not. Oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Ramesh.
No, go ahead, Jack. Go ahead.
Definitely not. Very briefly. What I always try to do is always adhere to, sort of the magic number of storytelling, 3, right? So at least have 3 very specific references to, the really core qualities of the script, the story, the character, the theme, and again, very specific. And then I also try to connect those if a script isn't sort of there yet, to also try to attach 3 discrete examples with films that, most likely, a fairly well-versed writer, or even a baby writer would know. And just also, in terms of, my experience has been score sheet and writing comments, but one interesting thing that the sort of guidance that comes from the administrators, which I found to be incredibly helpful and always sort of on top of and continuously fine-tuning the process, was always a reminder not to grade on a curve, right? To have some very specific guidelines, and swim lanes, if you will, to take to analyze a screenplay in a very complex way, because you want to do the writer justice. But specifically is that you're not comparing scripts to one another. If you're lucky to read, 10 scripts in 1 week that are all, A+++, then man, you had a really good week. But as and I don't know if that's ever happened to anyone
No.
in a contest. I mean, Godspeed if it has, right? That's amazing. The world needs as many great writers and passionate writers as possible and emerging writers as possible. But again, just to put a point on it, I think that I always just try to be specific and always just adhere for myself to keep it straight, to always at least have, with only a couple hundred words, usually sort of within the paradigms of what the contest asks for, is to at least have 3 really good examples, specifics about the screenplay, and 3 really good examples from, the cinematic world that hopefully can really continue to guide the writer on his or her process and their journey.
Yeah, I get very specific. Try to give detailed notes. There are some contests where, some scripts I've given 4 to 7 pages of notes.
Wow.
Because I am, for the lack of a better word, anal retentive
Nuts.
on that thing.
You're nuts.
So I'll list, like, I won't just say your dialogue has a ton of exposition. I will give examples, page numbers, and there have been occasions I've rewritten scenes because it's easier for me to explain that way than write a whole paragraph saying this is what you need to do. I'll go, here, you could try it this way. So I do give a ton of notes sometimes for scripts, and I get very detailed. I do not get a boilerplate. The problem is sometimes you find you're giving the same note to writers, and it sort of runs in you like, oh crap, I just wrote this pretty much the same thing about another script. Well, yes, so you sort of, you run into that issue, but I don't sort of cut and paste. I don't have like a list of comments already prepared that I just sort of throw in.
The reality of that boilerplate comment that I made, the other side of that is that, a lot of scripts do make the same exact mistakes. And so, how often do you read a script where the character doesn't have a goal, and so the script isn't about anything? Lots of scripts. And so you tend to say the same thing over and over again. But what I'm hearing from you is specifics. And so that's what our members should be looking for in their feedback. And if it's not specific, if that feedback's not specific, if they're not offering up the kind of elements that Jack spoke about, then maybe that could be something where somebody would go back to the contest and say, hey, something, this feels really generic to me. Right. Connie or Lori, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that sort of dovetails with what I said previously, where somebody reached out to me and I didn't like their template, if you will. What I do is try to set up the element that isn't working, whether it's structure or character or dialogue, with sort of like, these are the guidelines to make your structure work with your plot, and then here's where you're not achieving that. So I do give specificity, but after I sort of explain what the importance of it is.
Right. I think if you get a note like, you have a passive protagonist, that helps the writer zero. They want to know why. Like, what were you looking for? What didn't I do? Like, I think writers put in their best work. So just hearing that, there's no actionable goal, I think it helps them to know like what was missing. Because they may not know. They may think they have it in there. Because I think writers know their screenplays so intimately. They just assume that Lori was in a car crash 3 years ago. But if the writer doesn't get that across, like if it's not on the pages, I don't know it. So I think it's important that they know why their element didn't hit the mark we were looking for.
I will give them suggestions too. Like, there are times if, I'll say, how about if your protagonist does this, 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 and this instead of this? Now he has a goal or she has a goal. and now you can use the antagonist this, and now you have conflict. So I will do that. Give them examples of what they can do. I'm not saying you have to do it, but instead of not doing anything.
So if you get notes from a contest and they're 30 pages long, they're from Ramesh. Jack, did you want to say something? By the way,
yeah, I wanted to say two quick things. One, I don't really have the power to do it, but I'm going to nominate Ramesh for the Nobel Peace Prize for writing 7 pages, of notes, or the Poet Laureate, because that's pretty amazing. Good for you, Ramesh. Bravo. And the other thing I would just say is what I always try to do, which I think it can be helpful, is again to continually, if of course it fits. I mean, sometimes you get a script that just does not easily fit within a genre, right?
Yes.
But if you get a script that's, Die Hard in Walter's Diner, on Beverly Hills Drive, then, that's a shout out for you, Lockhart, is, then you talk about Die Hard, right? And so I think that orienting a script in genre can really be helpful for the writer as well, not only to talk about where the script succeeds, but where the script can evolve. And that also means that, if you read 5 scripts in a week for a contest that all have issues with, empowering and activating, their protagonist, then obviously those comments are naturally going to be specific to that script based on how how it develops, but also based on how it sort of checks the boxes or evolves beyond sort of the basics or the foundation of the genre. So I always think thinking about genre is not only helpful to me to try to do the best job that I can, but hopefully also to express within the context of a contest where ultimately you are trying to find, the best scripts out there, but also empower writers to, make their scripts as good as can be. I always think about sort of the ABCs of genre.
Mm-hmm. I will say that many entrants enter under the wrong category for genre. I'll see things like, why is this a comedy? Or, this is not a sci-fi or whatever it may be. And that's sort of how I, step into my notes. Like, take a look at your log line. This is how you serve a genre, blah, 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 blah. And for the log line, a lot of people don't understand the importance of it. Christopher, this is your sort of like specialty. But yeah, they just use it as a submission tool, and you can tell that that's usually where the weak parts in their script are when they can't get the log line
right.
If your log line is 4 paragraphs long so that it doesn't even fit on the screen, then it's not a log line. Like, I don't need a synopsis. I want to experience the script as I'm reading it. So sometimes I'll avoid reading the log line until after I've read the script. But sometimes you do have to go back and check the submission page and go like, I thought this was a comedy and nothing is funny yet.
Right.
Do screenplay contests ask the contestants for a log line along with the script?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They all do that, or some?
The ones that I work for,
they all do, but very rarely do I actually see the log line. Sometimes I see the log line only after I submit the review. After I submit my comments, then when you hit submit, the log line shows up. But oftentimes I don't see the log line. So and I don't know who the writer is. I'm reading it blind. I kind of tell the contest which genres I like to read, so that they sort of send those to me. So I kind of know I'm getting like horror, thriller, drama, comedies, that sort of stuff. And others will have, when you go in and you download your script, the genre is listed. But as Connie and I suggested, that's the other thing too. You'll read a comedy and you go, this should have been a drama. So
my experience is I've never seen a log line or a genre or the writer's name. So it's just I get the script and then you think about the genre and you obviously the first note of business in the score report is come up with a log line. So that's an interesting kind of differentiation, I think, between contests. But my experience has been just here's the script, go have a read. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about those score sheets. Let's talk about those rubrics, because I think it's important for writers to know what it is they're being scored on. Now, maybe you're not allowed to reveal exactly what it is that they're being scored on, or maybe you can. So does anybody want to chime in first on information that they can share, and then we can try to pull it out of you in some cryptic manner? So what is it that the writer needs to know that you're looking at specifically? I'll give you an example. I read somewhere that the Nickel Fellowship has a category called Meaning and Magic, which I think covers theme and perhaps the world of the piece. And so for Nickel, that might be important. Theme might be important. So, for example, Connie, are you scoring on theme at all in your contest?
I may miss some of them, but we need to score structure, plot, character, and not like we don't go through like Tom is a great guy. And, you know, it's more about character development overall. We do dialogue, theme, tone, and then emotional engagement. Like, is this something that will connect with an audience? We do marketability, and then we kind of get the strengths, the weaknesses, and final notes. And that's often a way that we can tell the writer, this is good, this is bad, and this is how they mix together and can go forward. But we try and hit all the critical elements of any script.
Well, that's really interesting, because my experience, that marketability piece to me is, my experience is scoring on a score sheet that's just purely, not that marketability is not craft driven, but literally my experience is filling out a score sheet that's just about anything on the page, anything and everything on the page. So it doesn't ask you to think about, you know, other factors like, you know, is this like another movie? Is this completely original? Is it derivative? It's purely, you know, about how the story is set up, how the story is executed, how the characters are set up, how the character is executed, and the thematic value. And again, my experience, that very much fits with this idea of this open writing assignment idea, where my experience, the contests that I've read for, and those administrators, you know, aren't that concerned with, is this the next, you know, Die Hard? What they want to do is empower and find writers that, you know, can be professional writers and fill open writing, you know, and the idea is to fill open writing assignments. So that's very interesting. My experience has been a little bit different in that regard. Hopefully that makes sense.
So then let's talk about the personalities of contests, because clearly if one contest is not interested in marketability and another contest is interested in marketability, then clearly they have different personalities, and then they are looking for different things. So for example, the Tracking B contest, where the prize is finding the winner, a manager. And that contest has actually done a pretty decent job of getting projects produced, including Extant, which was a Steven Spielberg TV series, won the pilot portion of that contest. And but that is a purely commercial driven contest. If you have a character driven slice of life drama about your grandmother's earthworm farm, sending it to Tracking B is probably not wise, because those just aren't the kinds of scripts that they're looking for. Where the Nickel, they tend to, although they have certainly awarded to scripts like Arlington Road, and My Friend Jay Simpson was a top 10 finalist with Armored, which was eventually produced. But I think the preponderance of winners tend to be loftier type of projects perhaps worthy of the Academy badge, so to speak. And so your grandmother's earthworm farm script might be a much better fit for the Nickel. So Ramesh, like with the Austin, they have all different categories, yes?
Yes, they have a ton of categories, but there's no, I've never gotten a sense of, that they're looking for a particular kind of script. I think their goal is to find good writers, for the lack of a better phrase. So that's what I look for when I read. Is the writing good? Is the storytelling good? We were talking earlier about categories, and the categories vary. I've read for a contest that wanted marketability. Other contests don't. It's usually like structure, concept, characters, dialogue, stuff like that. So I will look for good writing in stories. There have been times I have actually recommended a script even if the story isn't solid, but the writing's good. Because I have really enjoyed reading the script. The story might have issues, but if the goal of the contest is to find good writers, then I'm like, chances are, if the guy's writing or the girl's writing, her writing is good, then she might have other scripts that are really good. So if I advance this script, then, it goes on, a manager likes it, manager asks, what else do you have? Bob's your uncle. So that's my goal too, is to find good writing. So even if a story doesn't quite work, I will mention that in my notes, but then I will say I am recommending this writer because the writing's good and it was a good read and I enjoyed reading the script. So
one thing that I've never seen on a score sheet is formatting. And a lot of writers get so hung up on like, it's an entry extra. Do I do a mini slug? We don't care.
We don't care.
Story, we don't even notice that.
I will say that. Sorry. No. For formatting, that is where almost every writer struggles in the same aspects. That's where you'll have the same sort of mistakes happening, whether it be how to write a slug line or whatever. Some contests do score on that. They call it different things. Nobody calls it formatting. They'll call it presentation. They'll call it some folded into structure. But I will say that very often most entries suffer from poor formatting, and that will get under my skin because it is the one thing that puts everybody on a level playing field. So there's no excuse not to sort of rise up to the level that's expected within the industry.
Right, because ultimately formatting is sort of monkey business, where actually having to write a screenplay, that requires much greater skills. But formatting, if you have final draft, it does the formatting.
It does it for you. Right. Yeah.
Right. But on the formatting thing, I do read for contests that have formatting, and he's gonna hate me for bringing his name up, but I use the Pete Bridges thing. I look at a script. If it looks like a script, if the dialogue is supposed to be where it is, if the action's supposed to be where it is, if the character names are supposed to be where they are, I'm fine with it. I almost just like, if I'm supposed to judge on formatting, I'll open a script, I go, it's good. If it's 5 out of 5, I'll give it a 5 and move on. Because I don't pay attention to whether there's interior and exterior, or if I know where the scene takes place, that's all that matters. And Pete seems to be doing pretty well with his formatting. So hey.
So ultimately, perhaps the takeaway here is that maybe trying to second guess the scoring is maybe not where the writer's head should be.
Right.
Maybe the writer's head just needs to be in writing the best script.
Right.
Since it seems like every contest has its own fingerprint when it comes to scoring. So me trying to narrow something down, I think, is almost futile.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, but I would say that every contest that I've read for sort of has similar categories. They might be called something different, but everybody's looking for theme or plot or character or dialogue. I mean, those are like your core things. Others will look for concept, premise, marketability, and this presentation / formatting issue.
Do you feel that getting the feedback, paying extra for the feedback, generally speaking, is worthwhile. Let's pretend that it's not your feedback. Do you feel that it's worthwhile for writers to spend the extra maybe $20, $30, $40, however much it costs?
It could depend on where you are in the writing process. If you're brand new and you just want to, like, you only have your mother to read it, or like your next door neighbor. And it also depends on who you have access to that could give you that kind of objective feedback on a script. So we sometimes are the first or maybe the best option for writers who just need to know, am I on the right track? Will that give me something?
Other than Nickel, who else charges for feedback? Because I don't submit to contests, so I mean, I know AFF does not charge for feedback. Feedback just comes with every script you submit. But I know Nickel charges.
That's because they're not paying their readers.
But I don't know if Nickel's what, 25, 30, something like that. But I don't know if what other contests do that.
Yeah, I don't know either. I know that I submit feedback for every script that I read, so whether it gets to the writer or not, I don't know. I'd hate to think that it didn't.
Right, yeah. I liked Connie's answer. I thought it was a really good answer. So thank you. Connie, you won the Austin for your feature screenplay. So can you just kind of walk me through the aftermath? Was it helpful? I mean, I see people all the time who win contests, and it's great that they've won a contest. Congratulations. Maybe you get a prize. Maybe you get a copy of Final Draft. Maybe you get $1,000. Maybe you get $10,000. It's great. You can brag around the Thanksgiving dinner table. You can put it, in your Twitter feed. But in terms of moving the needle, did Austin move the needle for you?
It did a bit, but again, this goes back to where I was at my stage. That was the second script I've ever written in my life, so I had no idea what I was doing. And I was living in Florida, so I didn't understand anything about the industry. So when, just to compare that to when I became a Sundance Fellow, then I had written more scripts and I knew what to expect. So yeah, I'm still riding that wave. So I think a good advice for writers who enter contests, and especially if you advance, know ahead of time what your plan is. If you make the quarterfinals and you get that announcement early, it might be a good time to reach out to managers before you find out that maybe you did make the semifinal cut. So you have some accolade to go on. But they absolutely can. It depends on your frame of mind and how hard you're willing to market yourself based on a contest win.
Because ultimately, a contest can only do so much.
Right.
And so a lot of it is up to you. So a lot of writers aren't even really prepared, is what you're telling me.
Right.
They are not prepared to win. They win, and then they might expect the heavens to open up or that the contest is going to make introductions, but they're not. For example, the Nickel Fellowship is not going to make introductions. That's not what they do. It is a fellowship. You are paid to write a script the following year, and they're not going to make introductions. They're going to have a ceremony, and they're going to send out the information in press releases, and then they're going to let you in the industry do the rest. And but if you just sort of sit at home waiting for everybody to come to you, that could be a problem. So how do you market a win? Somebody asked this question earlier where they were perhaps a quarterfinalist in a contest. How do you market that? What do you do? Do you just start to write managers immediately and say, I won the contest, or what do you do?
Well, I think some contests do that for you. That's their whole shtick is you enter my contest and I'm going to introduce you to 5 managers or whatever it may be. And I think, it's it's up to the writer to do due diligence as to, as to Connie's point, where you are in your career, what you want to get out of a contest. Do you just want to copy a final draft, or do you actually want a contest that's going to make those connections for you? And some do it really well, and they do the heavy lifting of the marketing for you. I know some that do some behind the scenes marketing that they never even tell the writer about. In other words, if they get a script that, is far enough in the process, like the top 10 or top 20 or whatever, they'll pass it on to industry connections, even though it's not promoted as a win or within their website or blah, blah, blah. I've gotten calls from people at studios saying, hey, this script came across my desk that you wrote coverage on or whatever and stuff. So it does happen, but I think it's up to the writer to really sort of do that due diligence, and not just throw scripts at every contest that's out there.
I will say sorry.
No, go ahead, Connie.
For Sundance, you become part of a family. So years later, we're still getting meetings from people that are in Sundance. So it depends on the contest too. And I think writers should know ahead of time, like Laura said, do you just want to win a contest just to say I won a contest? Or are you just going for the ones that pay $25,000? You have a goal, and if it's a career goal, you'll probably get more out of it. Because then even if you don't win, if you get coverage or you place somewhere, it'll at least give you a gauge on where you are and if you're improving over your script.
I tend to have a more practical approach. I always feel like you should go for the money. I really do. Because the money will make your life a little bit easier, might make writing a little bit easier. The odds of any contest script selling, still against the odds, just like any script. And most contests really don't have industry cash, right? I mean, it's in my experience, it's really the nickel. That the nickel fellowship is the only contest that the industry overall respects. And even if the script's not great, a manager or an agent can sell the fact that you're a nickel winner. They sell that. They sell that brand. Other contests might have personal fans, like the Austin might have fans and Fade In might have fans. But industry-wise, I would say the only contest that really delivers its bang for its buck if you win is nickel. But that is a sliding scale because based on what Connie said, you can get lots of calls from people regarding your winning script, but if you're not positioned, you're not ready, they ask, what else have you written? And you don't have something, that could be an issue. So who's to really say? But there are contests out there. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of contests. I looked last night. I saw a list of like 150 contests. I hadn't heard of any of them. And
Chris, can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Because it might be helpful, but when I was a development executive at Disney, we had a junior executive who covered the nickel. And it was, and that was very unique, right? And that the junior executive also, generally tried to stay on top of contest scripts that were, so we were always looking for the diamond in the rough. We always wanted to have, the best and information. For me, I think that was a little bit unique. I could be wrong. I obviously don't know the landscape of every production company, and
we do where I work, Jack.
Right? And I think when we were at ICM, generally, we would either hear or even the nickel itself, I think, would cover sort of us, like they would let us know, and even beyond sort of the what you see in the trades or what have you.
Right.
So I think that obviously that avenue does exist where people do pay attention. And obviously the blacklist is a completely different thing and really quite notable. The other thing I would say, if it's helpful, is to think, and I'm going to use a baseball analogy here for obvious reasons, is that maybe to think of a contest, a high-level placement or a win as like the double. It puts you in position to come home and score, right? So I think Connie really hits the nail on the head, which is whether it's you get some financial, some extra financial stability, where you can concentrate on your next script, or you have a really good plan for your next script, or the script that you've entered in a contest that's doing really well is like a setup, for the fact that you're a thriller writer and you have a really great thriller script that's ready to go. So I think like having that plan, but some of the successful writers that I've been lucky to work with that kind of came up through the contest process, that generally what I've heard is that, and there obviously are some notable exceptions, right? But I think generally they consider success in a contest and the process of going through the contest to be extraordinarily worthwhile. But it's kind of like hitting a double, and then next time you get to the plate, you're really in position to score. You can hit a home run. That sort of, if that's helpful.
One of our members said that most contests, legit ones, have a page count requirement, usually under 135 pages tops. Is that true?
I have read for reputable contests. I think they're all mostly reputable, right? But I have read scripts longer than that in a contest.
I have too. I often read. I mean, I know some do, or some do. I think they charge extra if you're over 120 or 130. They say, up to 120, it's this much. Beyond that, you pay a little bit more. But I have read 140, 150, 170, 180 page scripts.
Mhm.
Lori, you also?
Yeah. I have gotten some that are 140, and it's like you have to buckle yourself in and realize that this person probably has some structure issues and pacing and things like that, but you still plod through. And some do charge extra and pay extra for that.
Right.
So we could say, please, Connie.
I was just going to say, like, if your script is 170 pages, probably that's not the only problem with the script.
Right.
So that's why a lot of contests say, like, if you're over 130 pages, we got to charge you a little more because that's 2 movies worth of stuff you've written.
Right.
In regards to Austin, and there is a first round, second round, how does that work in regards to the readers? Are there first round readers and then second round readers? And do they use the neophytes in the first round and then the more experienced readers in the second and third rounds? Is that how that works sometimes? I mean, obviously I know for like the final 10 scripts, let's say, because I was a judge for the Big Break a few years ago, and I just read the final 10 scripts. So clearly I was not reading all along. So how does that work?
My experience is that there are a group of dedicated and trained readers that carry through sort of multiple levels within the competition, within the competitions, and then invariably a select group of judges take it, whether it's a semi-finalist or a finalist round, take it, obviously, to the end. So that's been my experience. But there are a differentiation between readers, like, dedicated, trained readers carry through rounds, and then sort of, the late innings, again, I'm stuck on baseball. The late innings are handed over to the judges.
There's usually, in my experience, there's usually sort of an interim level. So there's the first round, if you will, then Austin uses the term second round, but I don't know what every contest has sort of like an interim level before it gets to those industry judges. I tend to be in that interim level for all the contests that I read for. And to answer a previous question, it sort of gives a check and balance against those earlier readers, because they want to know if you agree with those notes, if you agree with the idea that it was able to advance. And I will say, to my knowledge, every contest has at least 2 readers for each segment. So it's not just one person sort of tossing it out saying, this isn't going to happen.
Right.
I think Austin makes it clear, even in their things, that once the scripts that are listed as semi-finalists and then finalists, obviously, are read by people in the industry, like managers and development execs and stuff like that, and the ones before that, and that's how they do it. So,
one of our members said, most eloquently, if you think you're winning a contest with a 160-page script, you're exactly the writer contests prey upon to make their money, because you're fucking delusional. Listen, I don't vet our members.
But the contest may be the only access that writer has to hearing, stop it. You get to 100 page 20, you wrap it up. Like, figure out what brought you to this page that you still have 70 pages to go. So a contest.
I've actually had feedback within a contest from a writer who, submitted to the administrators like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I submitted that script after reading the feedback, and thank you for guiding me, because like Connie said, they have no idea.
But how honest are you in? It's like if you're writing coverage for a talent agency or a management company, you can be pretty blunt. But in a contest, this is commerce. Come on, the customer is always right. And so you can't be as blunt as you might be in the real world. You have to cushion the blow. I know that for fact. And so how do you couch that? How do you say, listen, man, like, this script sucks and it's way too long and you shouldn't be writing?
Well, I mean, how can you be the judge
Okay,
of that? I mean,
I'm being a dick.
I know you are. I know you are. It comes naturally. So
It does.
It's fun. You can't help it. But again, I kid because I love. But look, I think that my experience has always been that to be highly, highly constructive, and not to mince words, but because then that also doesn't do the writer a disservice, right? Everybody, this is, screenwriting is the major leagues, right? And first-time writers compete with $1 million writers. It can. So, but my sort of tutelage and my experience has always been be hyper constructive. But again, give the writer the straight analysis, because that's what he or she deserve for the effort they put in. And I mean, it's obviously different. But also, again, my experience has been that it's very geared toward, I know that there was one experience not tied to a contest that I've read for, but I heard about an instance where a writer applied to a contest like 13 times. And on the 13th try, the writer won.
With the same script?
That I don't know. But all I know is that a writer entered a contest 13 times and won. So the idea is that writer on try 1 may have submitted a 190-page script. And not to sound too Yoda-ish, But, we all know as creatives, it is very much a journey. So I think that process, that also can be a really important part, not just of entering a contest, but being part of a contest as an analyst, is that, invariably folks who are part of their contest are, again, not to get too, touchy-feely, but they're on their own journey as well. And the fact of the matter is, you could be reading script 4 and then 8 scripts later, right? This is a writer who wins the contest. So, be straight. My experience has always been be very, very direct, but also be very, very constructive. So, and I hear what you're saying about, look, this script is, just you're not really allowed to say the script is unredeemable, because in the creative process, maybe, unless you're writing a script that glorifies, something evil. I think in the writing process, everything is redeemable. And as Hemingway said, you stop learning about how to be a writer the day you die. Every day before that point, you can learn something about the craft. So,
I mean, look, it's a creative hobby or profession or wherever you are in the process. And if you endeavor in any creative process, you have to grow thick skin. You're gonna have to take criticism in order to improve. So if somebody chooses to go down this path of creativity, they have to build up that skin to be able to take criticism. Now, you can be nice in how you couch it, but you definitely have to be straightforward with people.
Somebody wants to know, have you ever read a contest script that was, let's say, 160 pages that was good?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
Not, but to be truthful, in the 150 range. It was actually quite good.
Ramesh?
No.
Lori? Connie?
No, I haven't.
All right, so Jack found that one script, and and by the way, I know Jack, so if
Trust me, I was shocked.
If he said it was a good script, it was a good script. So the answer would be not likely,
Right.
but it's possible.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
certainly possible.
I mean, there's certainly production scripts that are,
of course,
Right.
they're excellent.
huge. So I mean,
Aaron Sorkin writes 140, 150 page scripts.
Right.
So, hey.
All right, I'm going to read some questions here, and a lot of these are just comments. They're commenting on what you're saying.
Can I make a quick point about giving notes?
Of course, please.
About what Jack said, you can tell people what's wrong with their script without being nasty about it. And that's what I try to do. If a script doesn't work, I will tell them, here, this is why, ding, ding, this is why it doesn't work. But at the same time, you don't, and it's also subjective. I mean, what I love about a script, someone else might hate, and vice versa. I once submitted this was years ago, to AFF, and I got the reader's notes back. The first reader loved my script. The second reader hated every single thing the first reader loved.
Yeah, I was that reader.
To the point of listing it, saying the first reader said this, nope. It was just like, wow, it was almost personal against the first reader. So, so it happens.
It's so important not to take contest placements as personal.
Right.
yeah, it's business. Yeah.
So subjective, right?
Right.
Dennis Coleman wants to know, have any of you seen any of the scripts you covered for a contest anywhere else, like outside of the contest? So maybe did it become a movie, or have you read about it in the trades?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had years where the winner of Nickel was the same as the winner of Austin, and
Right.
they definitely, you definitely see them in multiple places. I know that I've gotten scripts, I'm like, I've read this, and I go back through different contests and find my notes from it, So
it's not uncommon to come across a script you've read a few years earlier in another contest or something like that. Now, in cases like that, I will let the contest know that I read it 4 years ago in another contest, just to sort of, for full disclosure's sake. But yeah, that happens. And I've seen writers, I mean, because when I read them, I don't know who writes them, but when the finalists are announced or whatever, you see, oh, that's the person's name. And then, you know, you'll see the person got repped by someone. And so it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
I once had the experience where I read a contest script and then a certain amount of, a certain period of time passed. And then I read that script in a studio capacity. So that was an interesting, and it had evolved. And that was a really interesting, you know, to again see a writer along their journey who had found some success with a script. And I remembered the script. It didn't win, but it was one of those scripts that had so much promise, and particularly conceptually, and kind of that you know, sort of, it worked on, I like to think of things that work, you know, in terms of a trailer, and things that from a character perspective that work in terms of like a bumper sticker. And this script really worked in both those ways within the context of the contest, and it only got better. So that was a really interesting, and that only happened once, but it was pretty interesting to see. I was like, wow, okay, yeah, that's cool, because you got a glimpse into the writer's journey.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen writers that I've advanced their material get jobs in the industry, not necessarily on that specific script, but I have definitely seen them evolve in their work. I think Vince Gilligan, his initial entry was he won the Nashville screenwriting.
Really? I didn't know.
Yeah.
Oh, he's done well for himself.
Yeah, he's done all right.
Pretty good.
Tiffany Fussell is asking, so it sounds like you all are speaking from a place of mentorship in some way, moving writers forward. Having said that, do you feel the industry pertaining to writing on the whole has gotten better since you started in the field?
Whether writing has gotten better or whether the industry has gotten better?
She says, do you feel the industry pertaining to writing on the whole has gotten better? So I guess the writing industry, perhaps the way writers are treated, I don't know, you can interpret any way you want. Well, here's what I'll say. I'll say that just to clean up the dead air is that a very big difference is, well, what we're doing right now. When I moved to Los Angeles 30 plus years ago, it was much harder to be able to connect with people in the industry. It was much harder to get this kind of information. So at the very least, I think it's certainly become more writer friendly in that respect.
I would agree. I think that the proliferation of contests is part of that. I mean, obviously, there for truly righteous reasons, there's a renewed or new effort on the part of Hollywood to really raise up, voices from communities that too often have not been heard from. I would point to that as a huge development. And something hopefully that doesn't just last several years, but it becomes a pillar of the way the creative community with television and motion pictures, advances. But I think overall, like Chris, when we did the original Inside Pitch, right, it was kind of a unique element. And, I think now, whether it's proliferation, whether it's all the amazing work that you do, Chris, and I don't play to the crowd when I say that. It's really true. I think it is. There are more places. I think the blacklist is an immense
You're talking about the annual list, the one that comes out once a year with the
that, and just as I understand it, the process of the way, not just the list, but all the reading that goes into compiling that list. And now there's a whole, website and that whole process connected to it. Those resources didn't exist, in 2002 when I graduated from school or and I think that is a really good development. I think it's obviously really tough for writers. It's just a tough business. And the business has contracted, but overall there's a lot more places to be seen and to be heard, I think. I think that's a fair assessment. That's true.
And just to be clear, the annual blacklist, although it is organized, there is a blacklist website. It's a paid service, and then there's the annual blacklist. And although they are both run by the same person, the same company, they are different in the respect that if you're paying for the service, that's not going to get you on the annual blacklist. The paid service blacklist is sort of like kind of a perpetual contest in of itself. Right. And we're not discussing that here today because it's a little different. But yeah, I mean, that's also that also provides feedback and there's pros and cons to all of that as well. If we were to say what are the 3 best contests out there, let's just try to be. I know everybody works for a contest here, but I mean, like, maybe I'll say it because I don't want to put anybody on the spot, and then you can agree or disagree or add to it. And so I would say from an industry perspective, it would most certainly be the nickel as number 1. Just hands down, no contest comes close to the nickel in regards to its branding, period. Then I would go, I know a lot of people like to put Austin, but I'm not going to put it number 2. I'm going to put Big Break Final Draft number 2. And I'm going to do that because of its brand. Because everybody in town knows Final Draft. And then perhaps a close second would be Austin. And those would be my top 3. And then sort of outside industry contests, smaller contests that perhaps the industry doesn't know, I would, and again, I'm not recommending any of these contests. This is just from my perspective. The Tracking B contest. And yes, I happen to know the person who organizes that. But the truth is that if you win that contest, they're going to work very, very hard to get you a rep for whatever that's worth. And so for me, those are sort of the 4. Now, please add to that, anybody. Laura, you probably have a lot more experience in sort of all this than I do.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are, I don't want to name names because I don't want to, sort of.
Yeah, I'll name the names.
But there are some, again, I go back to my earlier comment, look at what you're trying to get out of it. If a contest specifies in a genre, you probably have a much better chance than entering Nickel. Nickel gets 10, 12,000 entries a year. Austin is right behind
about
that.
7,800, I think, this year. I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's
I think
lower.
Nickel did about 7,800.
It's actually.
I believe.
But so your chances go down, but the rewards are greater, obviously. But you're much likely to get discouraged if you don't place among 7,000-8,000 writers. So if you enter a smaller contest that is genre specific and promises that somebody from, say Blumhouse is going to meet with you or get on a phone with you, I think you are much better off because at the end you want access. So regardless of the name on the laurels that you can slap onto the front of your script, if it doesn't give you access, I'm just not sure what the reason for entering is, unless it's just to, you know, get the feedback or whatever, as we've discussed previously. So I would say look at the smaller contests that can move the needle on your career.
I think that's where, and not to plug AFF, but you know I'm a big fan of that place. But the thing AFF has is their 4-day writers conference.
Right.
That is the big selling point of AFF, is that because if you do well, and even if you don't, you can come to these, you know, 4 days of madness and mayhem and wonderment.
It's a great contest. I'm there every year. I'm there every year, and you can sit in the bar with Shane Black and have a conversation with him that you would never be able to do in Los Angeles.
Absolutely, and that is what's good about AFF, and that's, you know, it's, you have that access to people for 4 days, and the overwhelming majority of people who come there, the panelists from LA, are open to talking to new writers, and so there is that for AFF.
And the Nickel has sort of an event, I believe. They've had events in the past, an annual event, and Big Break also. They do sort of a big kind of like a Hollywood premiere almost. In the past, it's been at the theater and at Paramount Studios, where they also give, you know, like the Final Draft Lifetime Achievement Award. And I think last year they had Quentin Tarantino there. So, you know, there are certainly thrills to all of that. So I don't knock any of that stuff. And again, I think that we do go back to what Connie said, which is, what is the goal? You know, why are you entering a contest? That then, of course, Laurie also built upon. Somebody did mention Sundance, and of course, we can't leave out Sundance. But for some reason, I don't know. I don't quite see that as a contest per se, and I don't know why. Maybe because it does feel a little more esteemed. But yes, we should most certainly put that in there. Anybody else want to add to the list?
No, I would just second Sundance, because as far as what the writer gets out of winning that one, it's not a financial thing, but you enter into a mentorship that is ongoing. You become a part of the family, and like I have 100 new people that I can reach out to. I don't know if it doesn't really feel like a contest, because it feels less competitive and it's more about nurturing and mentoring new writers, but it's always a good one to try for. I highly recommend that one.
Right. Can we talk a little bit about sort of how to shop for a contest? So we know which ones are good, but then there are all these other ones, and I don't want to be like Debbie Downer constantly, but you know, it's like you go to a contest website and they're like, yeah, we're going to introduce the winner to all of our industry contacts, and then they don't name any of the industry contacts. It's also vague. And then they have testimonials from a writer who says, I won this contest and my writing is so much better. My career has taken off leaps and bounds. I just signed with a big agent. And again, to me, it's all vague. Where are the names? Oh, where in Hollywood you drop names? When people don't drop names, I don't trust it, because everybody drops names. If you're not dropping names, I don't trust you. And so how do you determine the ones that are worthy, especially these smaller contests, Laurie, the ones that, you know, maybe we're not mentioning here?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that do it successfully and are legitimate do drop names. You know, it's the same thing with any sort of service that's out there, any coverage service or mentoring service that are, you know, you pay to be a part of. You don't want somebody who can't move the needle. Like I said before, you want the names. I'm not going to pay for coverage or pay for a service that I don't see a name, just like you said. So it really is up to the writer to do that due diligence and, go on IMDb and see what this person does, or do it just a Google search and see if they still have that job that they say that they, once have a screen credit on or whatever. Because very often they'll ride on the coattails of their screen credits for years when they haven't had a job in the industry for years.
Yeah, so most certainly sort of look for the specificity and read between the lines and also ask around. That's what the inside pitch is for. So if there's a contest, hey, has anybody entered this contest? Has anybody won? What was the experience? And we have seen a few of those kinds of questions. Somebody's asking about screenplay platforms. Do any of you advocate for screenplay platforms like Film Freeway or Coverfly? Oh, there's some serious eye rolling there from Lori.
Well, Film Freeway is like what Without a Box used to be. It's
Okay.
just an entry.
It's just a portal.
Sort of
Okay,
point.
yeah.
Correct. Coverfly is backed by some contests participate in it and some don't, because there is sort of a quid pro quo there, and there's a premium to be paid if you want to be on their publicized list and such. It's another way for the owners to make money.
It's a pay to play.
To an extent. You don't, just be very careful. You can easily get roped into paying on that site if you're not careful with how your script is displayed. Some contests automatically report to Coverfly because they have that arrangement with them. Not all do.
Does Coverfly still use the industry score? Does anybody know? So they were utilizing this industry score. It was sort of an internal algorithm that a writer can accrue based on the affiliated Coverfly screenplay contests and the affiliated Coverfly coverage services. So if you use the services that are affiliated with this, then you accrue some kind of number, and the higher number is an industry score. Now look, I don't have a problem with some sort of internal scoring system. I mean, let's face it, the contests use internal scoring systems, and the Blacklist paid service obviously uses a scoring system. But to call it an industry score, again, I don't know if that still exists. Somebody said, yes, they do. Yes, it still exists. Thank you, Anna. That's bullshit. I call bullshit on that. I work in the industry, and it is not an industry score. So to me, that's where these things get dicey, and this is how these things, like, screw it up for other places that are really doing the right thing. So look, an industry score for Coverfly, I don't know what that means, but I can tell you this: if you are submitting your scripts to their contests because you're trying to elevate your industry score, you're a chump.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say I think you could protect yourself and also empower yourself as a writer to, if you really want to enter a contest, to look for contests that are affiliated with institutions that are involved in the industry. It's sort of like that should be your,
like Nickel, like Sundance.
Good, right. Good housekeeping seal of approval, and I think obviously the ones that we've talked about are the ones that have been mentioned, Austin, Sundance, Final Draft, and obviously Nickel. I think that can only, that's only going to, that sort of authenticity, just like anything, that authenticity is really, really important.
people are pointing out sort of the long tentacles of Coverfly, where they seem to they have all different sorts of contests. There's We Screenplay, there's Diverse Voices, the Script Lab, plus 30 other contests. And so, you know, it's very incestual, and each is feeding the other, and so you probably end up getting caught up in that sort of whirlpool that has nothing to do with the industry, but only has to do with shelling out money to Coverfly. And again, listen, it's your money. If you want to shell money out to them, God bless you. You have my support. But we're also here to give you the information. So you know, it's a free country. Laura, you want to add any more to that?
No, I would just say that's where, you know, again, the due diligence comes in. Anybody can scroll to the footer of these websites and sort of do some investigative work and see where these tentacles reach. So.
All right.
I also think there's I also think there's something to be said for, again, institutions that offer these contests, and that is not their primary form of business, right?
Right.
The Motion Picture Academy, you know, doesn't pay the salaries of its staff members and put on the Oscars because they run, you know, as august as it is, the fellowship, right? It is a part of their overall mission to really be, you know, sort of, you know, this landmark institution about the craft and the science and arts of motion pictures. Final Draft, right? Austin, Sundance, and these places, you know, unless I'm totally off base, I don't think I am. Their business is not to run screenplay competitions. You know, they do a lot of different things, and they see the contest as part of their mission. You know, I think that could be a way for writers to, again, sort of do a quick differentiation, whether or not, you know, your sole business is to run a contest.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
So we mentioned Austin. What about these film festival contests? Does Nashville still do a screenwriting contest? I know that it was, because I know that they did a conference also, and that it was fairly well respected. And that's a good film festival also.
Yeah.
And but you know, there's also a lot of small film festivals. Connie, I believe that you have won some of the smaller contests as well, and so can you tell me your experience in any of those? And yeah, it's nice to win, but are they helpful? Is it just sort of a badge of merit and then you move on?
Well, to be specific, like the Kairos Prize is a fairly small and specific contest, but that let me quit my day job and write full time for 2 years and go back to school. So it had immense benefits. And
is that because it paid you? Is that okay?
Yes.
Are you allowed to say how much? I ask all the hard questions.
It was just $15,000.
Okay. All right.
So it was a nice it's a nice confidence boost. So it can help you justify to the people that need to justify to their families, I have a right to do this.
Yeah.
It can be hard, especially for women, and especially for writers who are coming at it later in life. Sometimes you need an outside source to say, go for it. Like, we think you might have something there, and at least give it a try. And then the Big Bear International Film Festival, this was years ago, but that was my first script. So it was my first successful experience. But that was fabulous too, because it was a great entree into the whole world of it. And I didn't win that one, but I came in second place to Irish Producer, who was nominated for an Oscar. So I don't feel bad about second place for that.
So,
congratulations.
You know, again,
Congrats.
it sort of bounces back. I do feel like the cash prize, especially a big cash prize, is something that there's no dispute there. If somebody says, you know, the top prize is $25,000, that's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And as a writer, that could probably do you more good than meeting an agent through Zoom, because the agent's probably not going to sign you. You're probably not ready. It could very well just be a courtesy thing, like the organizer of the contest is friends with the agent, and so they're just doing that. Again, I would look and see, all right, so if the goal is to meet the industry, how many people met the industry and it led to success? I'd rather have $25,000 than, 2 or 3 meetings that don't amount to anything, because that $25,000 you invest in your writing and take the time to make those connections that you need and the network. But again, it's personal choice. But if they say the prize is $25,000, then there's no interpreting that. So,
there are many that say things like $25,000 in prizes. So you have to, again, read the fine print, because you're only going to get 500 of that 25,000.
Oh my, that's like cash and prizes, right?
When
It's
it says
like,
valued at
like let's make a deal.
Yeah.
I wonder what the other 24,500 prizes are.
Well, it's the premium price for final draft, which again,
it's 24,000. Wow, holy cow!
No, it's a combination of all these different things that total that 25,000. So again, fine print is your friend.
So
Yes.
there are a lot of habitual contesters. There are these writers who really they do nothing but enter contests. Is playing the contest circuit, is that the way to get into this business? Or should it augment some other effort to get in?
It should not be your whole plan. Because it's because then you're putting your career in somebody else's hands. Somebody else is going to pass judgment on your script and tell you will advance or you will not advance. If that's your plan, then I would question how much you want to write. But it can be part of your plan. I do sometimes feel bad for writers who I see the same scripts coming through again and again and again with 0 changes. God bless them, but they're trying. But there needs to be a bigger plan of attack for a writing career than just getting a letter in the mail that says, congratulations, you've advanced. Hopefully.
Agreed. I think it's important to just, to really have an all of the above kind of strategy. There's no one path, just like writers are all singular and unique in their sheer her, his way, that there's no singular path to really, standing out as a writer and seizing upon opportunities to write movies or television as a career, for a living. And obviously contests are one way in many different ways to empower that mission. But, all of the above strategy is I think probably it's not simple, but I feel like that's probably the best way to go. There's tools in the toolbox, and contests are one of them. So
Anna is asking, what are the most underfilled genres in contests? And is it a worthwhile, I hate when that happens, somebody added and then I lost it. What are the most underfilled genres in contests, and is it worthwhile trying to write something that is underrepresented?
That's a great question.
I would advise against writing to address some need that you think is out there.
Especially in a contest.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the marketing savvy ones have all glommed on every sort of genre and diversity issue that they can think of in order to get more entries.
I don't know if the others have seen this, but there's usually a trend you will see in contest entries.
Yeah.
Like when Twilight came out, there were so many vampire werewolf scripts I got. When Walking Dead came out, I read just a ton of zombie scripts. So this year I have read a bunch of pandemic scripts. So you do see that does happen. You will see that sort of sort of cycle through. But I, a lot of the contests I read for, some of them have specific genres. You submit to the action, or you submit to the horror script contest or whatever. But I really haven't seen anything underrepresented. But Connie's right. Don't try and sort of figure that out. So.
Maybe musicals.
Yeah.
I have read a few, but
I have. Yeah, I have.
No, there you go.
Yeah, I think write what you're passionate about, and I think that it's always that difficult sort of yin and yang, which is on one level, particularly for a writer starting out, to try to anticipate the marketplace is a very difficult task, particularly if you are operating, without some real industry insight. The flip side of the coin is, you do want to, sometimes, you do want to write something that feels conceptually fresh or is taking a genre to kind of a new level. I think overall, again, my experience with contests is that it's purely about the strength of the writing. It's about
absolutely,
and that can come, in whether it's a musical, or whether it's something else. So I think it's just, again, I think to try to. There's so many different factors that I think go into contests and how they, each contest takes on a life of its own, right? That to try to anticipate that can only add confusion to a process that already can feel at times very confusing and overwhelming and very emotional and very complex. Steven Spielberg likes to say, making a movie is simple, but it ain't easy. And, I think, to try to simplify things as much as you can, even in your own writing, to create the most empowering pathway for a writer. And I think trying to figure out what a contest wants or doesn't want, just write the hell out of a script and live in the moment, Michael Jordan style, and, see what happens.
Somebody wants to know, would managers really be open to reading a script that is only advanced to the quarterfinal round of any of the top contests that you mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah. I landed a manager off a nickel script that made quarterfinals. So.
My caveat would be that you have a window because once they announce the semifinalists,
right,
then that window might have potentially closed. So, and then the same thing goes with the semifinalists to the finalists.
The finalists.
However, I think what you'll also see is you'll see an engagement level sort of commensurate from, how do I say this in a dignified way? So if you're a quarterfinalist, you're probably not going to get approached by a manager who works, let's say, at Brillstein or Anonymous. You might get approached by a smaller management company, one that sort of is on the same level as that quarterfinalist. And then as you get to the semifinalist, then you might get a more impressive manager call. And then a finalist, and then even the winners you might actually hear from the big management companies or even the big agencies. That's not to say, remember, agents and managers are individuals, even though they work for a company. It's not the company that's pursuing as much as it is the individual manager or agent. So, but keep that in mind, that a quarterfinalist script may not entice a manager from Brillstein as much as the finalist script might. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try. You should try everything, but keep your, manage your expectations. Anybody agree, disagree?
Agree, but
yeah, I would
totally agree. No.
And I would add that know your audience. Some managers are going to be like, I don't care if you placed in Austin. It's not important to them. So do some digging, listen to them on Twitter or a podcast that they may have spoken on, and see what their sort of feeling is, if contests are meaningful to them. Because some don't pay any attention to contests.
Right. And I'd say probably most don't, to be honest. Somebody asked, if you advance a nickel, do you get something proving that you placed? Do you get some sort of diploma or a medal or something that you can show people? So if you're a quarter finalist, do you get some kind of official documentation?
You get a letter, right?
You get a letter. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So that would be it. But you're not going to get some kind of badge or
Well, they list, most contests will list everyone who advances. So I guess you could link it, link that to, if you're going to do a query email or something.
Or you could just lie and say that you were quarter finalist in nickel. The list is so long, nobody's going to check. If somebody has to check to see if you're on that list, he's probably not a very good manager, because it means he's got plenty of time on his hands. Sometimes, listen, you know something? You can do a little scamming too. You can do a little bit of sleight of hand if you have to. Just don't say I had anything to do with it. Okay, maybe that's bad advice.
Yeah, it's terrible advice.
So in a thumbnail sketch, what are the most common kinds of protagonists you come across? What grabs you or turns you off about them? Too passive, too arrogant, unclear, not sympathetic, et cetera, et cetera. What are the most common kinds of protagonists you come across?
Passive. If things happen to them, that's not a sequence of events isn't the same thing as a plot.
Correct.
So if you have a character who has experiences stuff or has to endure something, like, we want them to drive the script because we want to be that person, or we want to think we know that person. That's who we're going to see. That's who we experience the film through. So they should be doing the heavy lifting, and a lot of times that's the hard thing.
Yeah, and not pushing, not exposing, the raw nerves of their emotions enough. Being afraid to really put them through the ringer. It's very clear when.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
My first year screenwriting professor, and it always stood with me as a lesson. When I worked at ICM, when I worked at Disney, et cetera, is his assignment was that we had to, our first script that we wrote for the MFA program, our protagonist had to be in every single scene in the movie. So we learned the lesson very clearly and quickly, which was to have your protagonist in every scene in the movie, invariably, you have to really figure out something for that protagonist to do, right? And what we've often talked about, Chris, that through line, the hook and the ladder, and that I completely agree with the other experts here. They all hit the nail really on the head, which is that you just often see characters that are not mission driven, and characters that are confused, literally, dramatically, rather than conflicted, right? So you need to act out on your conflict as a character, and not sit in a room and ponder why you're, and just think about, oh, wow, I really don't know what, you need to try things, the main character, one of the main characters in American Beauty is like a perfect example, and Alan Ball often talks about, how he wrote a draft where Lester Burnham did a lot of sitting around, and he kind of found that extra life with Lester Burnham, like getting his body in shape, which helped his mind get in him work out these other emotional things. And that character is on a very, very kind of internal journey, but it's externalized through a very powerful, clear kind of external process. And I think that, again, I don't think it's a bad idea for a writer to even sit down and just do a sketch of a story where that protagonist is literally in every scene. It's a good lesson. I think.
Off that question, it doesn't matter to me whether a protagonist is sympathetic or not. He or she needs to be compelling. That's what I look for. The person
That's
can be a bastard. Right, he can be a bastard. I don't care. I mean, Nightcrawler is a good example. Lou Bloom's an asshole throughout, but he's compelling as fuck. So for me, it's whether or not the character is compelling, and also whether, as Connie said, whether he's pushing his and the story forward. I do come across a lot of scripts where the protagonist doesn't do anything. If it's a murder mystery, he's not the one who winds up solving it. Someone else solves it for him.
Right.
Something like that, and you're like, no, he should be the one solving the mystery, because the stakes are for him, not for the supporting characters. So that happens a lot, where the protagonist is introduced, but then essentially plays a secondary role in the story. So
that's such a great point. I would add very briefly, again, I appreciate it so much, the opportunity to talk about it. I obviously get passionate about it, but that fires me up. What Ramesh said is that I also think that one thing is that a lot of these scripts that you're reading, they make a mistake. They don't think about the geography of their characters, that there are essentially sort of three characters that are doing the dramatic jobs that the protagonist should be doing,
right,
all on his or her own, right? And to really think about sort of almost like a map, like a map of the world, like where do these characters fit in together? And how do they interact with the other, and where do their borders lie, and that their individual kind of voices and missions are very clear. But I think you see a lot of kind of like dramatic mission creep, where the protagonist's, what should be the protagonist's through line is actually disassembled and given to other secondary characters that we just don't care about. We don't care as much about, or as Ramesh said, isn't as compelling. And that can add to a dark character, can make that character sympathetic or empathetic. Before that horrible last season, Game of Thrones did this incredibly well. I mean, it took some of the worst characters and then gave them, through action and the geography, the way they interact with other characters, gave them moments of not redemption, but gave them moments of, where they were sympathetic and empathetic. So, and they were truly compelling as a result. But the way all those characters fit in together, I think, is another thing to really think about. Don't give action to someone else when it really should be, with your protagonist.
All right, with just a few minutes left to go, somebody wants to know, what categories do you weigh the most heavily when assessing a script for a contest? Structure, plot, character, theme. Just one word.
It's package. It's a total package. There isn't one.
I would say that, yes, I definitely preface any sort of notes with they all have to work in synergy, but at the end of the day, theme is very important for me, because why are you telling this story? What do you want the audience to walk out of the theater with? It's something that writers very often don't think about.
Anybody else?
I go, if the story is compelling and the characters are compelling, I'm in. For me, I will read a script and I'm like, it can be it can be a detective story that, it's the gumshoes. But if the story is compelling and it's written well, I'm like, okay, I'm in on this. And, now take me on a journey and thrill me. So that's, and so then everything else falls in, because then the structure has to be good, the characters have to be good, the dialogue has to be good. As Connie said, it's the package, the whole thing.
Writers should know that when they submit a script, they're creating a relationship. Like when on the first page, it's like speed dating, and the ball's in your court. So you don't have to know how to dance the same dance I do, but be good at something. So you have power when you submit a script. You get to tell me if you're good or not. So
yeah, I would say it bears obviously further discussion, but you only asked, I've already passed one word, but you asked for a few words, which is, for me, it's very much if I can see the trailer for the script,
Right.
and I can sort of sum up the main character in like a bumper sticker, and those two things work throughout the course of the screenplay, then that's going to be, in my mind, a screenplay that is successful. And there are obviously levels to that success, but I think that for me, there obviously are a lot of different components that, a script could have awesome dialogue and then have points where it needs to evolve in other areas. But,
Right.
At the end of the day, for me, a really successful just screenplay in and of itself, regardless of a contest or not, are, sort of that the trailer and the bumper sticker really is.
And the other thing is, if it's a comedy, make me laugh. If it's a thriller, have suspenseful sequences, have sequences that have suspense in them, that have tension, that has conflict. Well, every story needs conflict. But, the same thing, if it's a horror film, scare me. It's tough to scare on the page, I realize that, but have sequences, have set pieces that you're like, oh, wow, that, you can read a comedy and at the end of it, you're like, huh. And the same thing with thrillers. You read it. I read a lot of thrillers. You read the end of the thriller and you're like, there's not a single suspenseful sequence. There are no like wow set pieces in there. And it's like, okay. Or action films, same thing. So.
How about pet peeves? So just maybe, well, not a lot of time. So is there perhaps one major pet peeve that you might have? Maybe you don't even have to, you can just say formatting or bad dialogue. Anybody want to jump in?
Parentheticals very often have like 4 lines of action in them. You just break it out into an action line. You don't use them. Write a script without them. And then if you absolutely have to have 1 or 2 to make a clear point, then it's okay. But it's
you are
amazing.
talking about, just in case anybody didn't get it, you're talking about a parenthetical within the dialogue.
About under the character's name. Yeah.
Correct. Okay.
Correct.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Pet peeve?
Dialogue that is nothing but exposition. And sometimes you'll come across, and this is just, I'm just throwing out an example. You'll have 2 characters who are childhood friends, let's say. They've known each other since they were 2 or 3. Now they're in their 30s. One of them's getting married. And one of them will turn around to the bride and say, hey, tell me how you met your husband again. And then off we go. Or, tell me again what your mother does for a living. And then you have, a dump of exposition, of information. So that happens a lot. I see that. And it's just like, no, you don't need that. And oftentimes that information is really not necessary to the entire plot, because if they're childhood friends, chances are she knows this already. So things like that.
I would say give me a twist, and it doesn't matter the genre. And it could be small, or it could be I see dead people, Kaiser Soze big, right? But give me a twist. It could be an emotional moment, a moment where the main character has an epiphany, changes, perspective, or it could be, a big plot point. But in ways small or big, I really look for a writer to take, because it means audience engagement and it means really locking an audience in and taking them to a place and then surprising them. That's just something I really look for and I hope for. I literally hope every script that I sit down to write has one, at least one.
So as we wrap this up, is there anything that we didn't discuss? Is there anything that, as a screenplay contest reader, you feel like the audience needs to know?
I noticed this in scripts, and I don't know if the others do or not, but I come across a lot of scripts that have a first page that starts with a huge bang, and then we flash back to 3 weeks earlier. And I've noticed that a lot recently. where it's like the first page is like, I guess they like grab them on the first page, and it's like first page, bang, it's something, or a tower falls, or a woman slashes a throat, or whatever it is, and then it's like flashback 3 weeks later, and earlier, and then that's the story before we like get back on like page 95 back to the original scene. And I've noticed that quite often in the last few years.
Ramesh, I had a conversation with Jack not that long ago, and I said to him, when I read scripts from new writers, too many flashbacks. Unless the script is utilizing a flashback structure, you probably don't need a flashback. I would say, I'm going to go on a limb and say 8 out of 10 amateur scripts that I read have unnecessary flashbacks.
Agreed, 100%. And go ahead, Connie.
4 of those will be, we'll start with somebody longingly picking up a photograph off their agenda, and flashback to the moment. Yeah, that's my peeve. It's just like half of the script have moments where somebody will be motivated to flashback by a photograph.
And
the real estate. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jack. No, go ahead, Jack.
The real estate of your script is so precious, right? Here's sort of the twice now I'm going to quote Hemingway, but Hemingway described a novelist as, he thought all writers are thieves. If you're a novelist, you get to break into a house and you get to take your time. You look around, you compare the china patterns, you want to go for the most expensive stuff. If you're a screenwriter and you break into a house, and let me just say, I'm not advocating anyone break into houses. This is obviously a metaphor. And blame Hemingway if you feel, attracted to criminal lifestyle. But you're a screenwriter, you break into the house, you got to grab what you got and you got to get the heck out, right? And the idea of real estate is so precious that if you have flashbacks, I would say they either need to work like Amadeus, where it is literally this incredible confessional by Salieri, and that Salieri is as an important character in that movie as the titular character is Amadeus, or a flashback can work like Lone Star, right, where it tells another through line of mystery that has massive impact on the present day. To have a flashback that is purely to tell us stuff that you should already know kind of through the regular run of your script, take a really hard look at how your flashbacks and really put them through the ringer. They have to operate at a, and I would say maybe 10 seconds more is that maybe what Lori and Connie and Ramesh are saying all together is this is a way to probably hit a high mark in a contest, is to actually have some kick-ass flashbacks, right? Because I think we would probably all raise our hand and say we constantly read in contests scripts that have flashbacks, and it doesn't elevate the script, it kind of weighs it down.
Right. So. And Lone Star has a hell of a payoff on that flashback.
Exactly. Right. It's a whole nother movie. I mean, it's literally, but it's also not. Right. Like you can't have that movie without the flashbacks. Right. But it's with flashbacks are so engrossing that I think we would probably agree. You could just watch that movie, and be interested. So flashbacks are if you nail your flashbacks, that is a huge hallmark for the ability to carry a screen story, beginning, middle, and end. 100%. It's a great point, Ramesh.
Whatever you do, don't start the first scene as a flashback, because you flashback from something that you've never established.
I've read scripts that have flashback into a flashback into a flashback into a flashback into a flashback, and you completely lose yourself. The other minor peeve I have is I have no thing against voiceover, but when you use voiceover to describe exactly what is happening in the scene, like you'll see a dad shows his son a book, and the voiceover is my dad showed me a book. And you do come across that occasionally. So.
But also,
please go ahead, Connie.
We're having fun, but know that we're on your side. Like we want to enjoy the script. We're trying to do it. Like we go, at least I do, and every reader I know, would go into it wanting to be entertained and engrossed in your characters and your story. So don't think of it as an adversarial role. Like we're just gonna pick apart everything that's wrong, because we want to enjoy our jobs, and that's up to the script.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Every
like
script-
Ghostbusters. You know, Ghostbusters. They said, "We want to believe you."
Right.
You know, we want to love your script. Like, we don't
Right.
do this because we don't do this because we hate scripts and we hate writers and we hate good writing.
Yeah.
It's actually all the other things. You know,
When I open a script for a contest, pretty much every script I read for a contest, I want to be able to recommend.
Mhm.
You know, I want to open and go, wow, yes, this writer, go ahead.
Yeah.
So I never read a script saying, God, I hope this is going to be crap.
Especially
So-
when you're not getting paid for it, Ramesh.
you're writing 400 pages of notes.
So I actually keep here. I keep notes. See, this is actually all the notes I take on scripts.
Oh my god!
I have
That's
like
awesome.
I have like legal pads just piled up because I jot down all this stuff. So
Nobel Prize winner. I'm telling you.
Well, so it
No,
seems
man.
apparent
Beautiful.
that that there are worthwhile contests out there, and they can be a bridge to the industry. And there are good readers out there, passionate readers out there, who are looking for scripts to recommend, that they hope that they get those winning scripts. And I guess it's up to you to deliver those winning scripts. So I wish you luck in that pursuit. I'm going to thank our guests, Ramesh, Connie, Lori, and Jack. Thank you so much for taking 2 hours of your day to speak to the members of the Inside Pitch. And of course, I want to thank the Inside Pitchers, the tippers, for your support and your participation in the group. So I'm going to say goodbye. Let's say goodbye. And
bye, everyone.
again, thank you, everybody, both our panel and our viewers.
Keep writing, everybody.
Yep, keep writing.